British PM Keir Starmer has declared that Europe is at a pivotal moment in history and must rally to support Ukraine. The Prime Minister announced a new package to supply Ukraine with over 5,000 air defence missiles, boosting both Ukraine's security and also job growth in Belfast. Now, following a critical summit in London, leaders agreed to maintain military aid to Ukraine while also increasing economic pressure on Russia. Starmer seems to have now found his feet on the international stage, but will that be enough to distract from his problems at home? For more, let's bring in Will Kingston, who's in London for us, contributor for GB News, also the host of the Fire at Will podcast. Great to see you again.
G'day, Aaron. How are you?
I'm doing very well, and great to have you on the program once again. Obviously, we have spoken about Keir Starmer's had a really rough start to his prime ministership, almost a record-breaking bad start to his prime ministership. But over the past few weeks, has he shown a different side of him? Is Keir Starmer having a moment?
I'm not sure he's shown a different side of him, but he is having a moment. In fact, The Economist had on their cover only a couple of weeks ago an image of his face on Winston Churchill's body with the title Winston Starmer, which was basically, and I try and suggest that he is positioning himself as the great statesman of Europe. And I think what he's recognising, which many politicians have recognised before him, is that domestic politics is really hard. It involves trade-offs. It involves tough economic decisions. Whereas it's much easier to sound like a grand statesman on the international stage and just throw money away at causes which sound noble. And the Ukraine cause is indeed in many ways noble. So this is in many ways an attempt, as you framed up, Aaron, a way to reset his agenda. And he's doing that quite well. And the unfortunate thing is he isn't getting adequate pushback from the Conservative side of politics. I think Kemi Badenoch is like that 115-kilometre-an-hour medium pacer bowling half volleys to get the out-of-form batsman back into form. And she's doing that. And she's not being able to really put a lot of pressure on him. In terms of the actual support for Ukraine, it's that interesting situation in the UK where most people in the UK, if you look at the polls, are sympathetic to the Ukrainian cause. But at the same time, I don't think many people have done the cost-benefit analysis to say, if we give this amount of money to Ukraine here, we take it away from these domestic policy priorities here. It's the exact same with things like climate change, where if you ask someone if they're in favour of climate change investment, they'll say yes. But then when you say you're going to take money away from or put money onto your energy bill, they'll say no. So Starmer's doing well on the international stage. At the same time, whether or not it is enough to distract from really significant problems at home will remain to be seen. It's still 4 years to go to the election. It's a long time.
What I find interesting is the difference between voters in the United States and the UK. Voters in the US gave a clear mandate to the Trump administration to end the Ukraine war, and they were concerned about the amount of money being spent by US taxpayers on the Ukraine war, defending Ukraine. In the UK, though, as we see, Starmer's having a moment and announcing billions of dollars more, essentially European nations jumping up and stumping up the cash for Ukraine to be able to continue its fight against Russia.
It is interesting. I think the key differences between the US and the UK are the war does feel closer to Europeans, continental Europeans and members of the United Kingdom than it does to Americans, but geographically, but I think also culturally, the fact that this war is on continental Europe does bring back echoes of World War II for many people. The Churchill legacy is still strong. It's interesting that all of the British politicians, to varying degrees, want to have their Churchill moment. And I think this is an opportunity for Starmer to have his Churchill moment. So I think there is that degree of sympathy which is imbued from history that many British people feel. But the other thing is as well, is that the Europeans haven't paid across individual countries nearly as much as the Americans have. Overall, in terms of the entire European Union, slightly more, but the total cost has been relatively small. I think the really interesting thing will be if America does withdraw its support and the UK and the Europeans do have to stump up more money, how much longer that goodwill will go on for. My sense is actually that when the cost becomes higher, the relative levels of support will become lower.
It's interesting you say that, and you mentioned about Winston Churchill, of course, in that infamous meeting a few weeks back. In the background there where these pictures are was the bust of Winston Churchill there as well. It's interesting with Keir Starmer, just finishing up on him. I thought that when he went in for his meeting the day before Zelensky's meeting at the White House, it would be a disaster. We know just by listening to Elon Musk, there is a real bee in the bonnet of a lot of conservatives, MAGA Republicans in America with free speech in the UK, with the Starmer administration and the Trump administration couldn't be further apart. But Starmer knew how to play Trump compared to how Zelensky went in the following day, right? When the questions got tough and JD Vance put pressure on Starmer over free speech, Starmer didn't fall for it. Instead, he pulls out of his pocket an invitation to Windsor Castle from the King. I mean, that was one of the most genius moves I've ever seen.
I think you have a different degree standard for genius than I do, Aaron. But nonetheless, it was clever. It was clever politics.
Well, hang on. We watched what could happen if you don't know how to play Trump. Not a genius in everything, but at least in that situation, a genius in dealing with the Trump administration.
I agree. He has shown more tact than many people suspected, and he has probably put his personal feelings to one side. And he's done what we know you need to do with Trump, which is basically to suck up to him, to flatter him, and not to push back. I wonder with Zelensky how much the English as a second language thing plays into it, but that's a conversation potentially for another day. Starmer did do very well in that conversation, but again, where has it led to us? What's the end outcome for that other than some photo ops? The US is still planning on withdrawing support if this current round of peace negotiations fall through. The UK will have to step up along with Europe as a result of that. There is still a huge question mark as to whether the UK and Europe have the military and economic and industrial capacity to be able to fill the gap left by America. So we will see. In terms of diplomacy, it was a really strong performance. In terms of the outcomes of that diplomacy, whether or not it actually led to any tangible success, time will tell over the next couple of weeks as to whether or not a deal gets done.
Yeah, I think you're right there for sure.